16-year-old Melanie Grigg was with Bree Jones when she died. She told Newcastle Coroner's Court that she and up to 7 friends were at this Caves Beach house when Bree arrived on Friday night, June 2nd. She said Bree was disorientated and couldn't speak properly. She said Bree was put to bed at around 9 o'clock. The following morning, she couldn't wake Bree and had wiped away liquid from her mouth and nose. She then went back to sleep. You just decided to let her lie there and let it happen. Yes. When Melanie awoke at 1:30 that afternoon, Bree wasn't breathing. She told the court a man who was also in the house but who can't be identified said, "I think I'd better call my doctor and tell him that I gave Bree some of my methadone and she doesn't look well." An ambulance was called, but Bree was already dead. Melanie told the court that it was the second time the man had given Bree methadone. The first time, she drank it with water and vomited all night. The man is a former heroin addict who receives prescribed methadone from a Lake Macquarie chemist. Also in court, Sharon Bedgood, a teacher at Swansea High School. She told how she had let Bree, who was suspended from school just days before, sleep at her house with a 30-year-old man. She was criticised by the court for not telling Bree's parents, who sat through today's proceedings, that their runaway daughter was in moral danger. Coroner Col Elliott adjourned the matter indefinitely while police make further inquiries. The court is also awaiting the results of toxicology tests, which should indicate how Bree Jones died. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
Mr. Rex Morgan, MBE, Executive Principal, People of our schools.
It's now my very proud duty to declare the new Parnell building well and truly and officially open.
Newcastle Martyr Heritage Wall, 1995.
The match in Coffs Harbour was the Australian Barbarians' first run before their tour of Canada. They were pitted against a Phil Hawthorn Memorial side. The Barbarians, with the help of Glenn Ella, scoring 14 tries to 7. All money raised will go towards leukaemia research and junior development. In the first Raymond Terrace to Stockton's Boat Rowers Hotel Surfboat Marathon, Nobbies proved too strong, narrowly defeating Swansea Belmont. Only 21 seconds separated the crews over the 25-kilometre race, with Cape Hawke finishing third. Meantime, in netball, Newcastle, representing New South Wales, was beaten in the Interstate Challenge in Victoria. While in Central Coast Aussie rules, Batto Bay has reversed last year's grand final result down in Terrigal. The Hawaiian Ironman, won by Australia's Greg Welsh last year, remains the ultimate test for triathletes, and as one Newcastle's Scott Weavers is out to conquer for the first time on Saturday week.
I'm worried about it. I think I've got something to be worried about. I want to finish it, and hopefully I finish it strongly and comfortably. That's my main aim from it. Hopefully I won't suffer too much.
At his first serious attempt at the Foster Ironman this year, the 25-year-old finished 14th and 3rd in his age group. Just ahead of him in 9th position was fellow Newcastle athlete Mick Jerd, who 2 months ago ruled himself out of Hawaii after contracting bronchitis. But a new sponsor in the income tax professionals and the support of friends changed his mind.
I'm going into the race physically stronger than I think I've ever been before, so I'm really psyched.
Unlike Weavers, it'll be Jerd's 3rd attempt at the 3.8 kilometre swim, 180k cycle and 42k run, which winds its way through lava fields. Both are considered among the country's best distance triathletes, but are at different stages of development.
I have no set time goals for this one. It's my first time. I'm just using it as experience. It's a completely different race. It's so much hotter and the conditions are renowned to be so much harder.
My main aim is to come back as age group world champion, and if I've got to go 9 hours for that, well, I'll have to do that.
It's just the sort of weather rescue workers could expect to be called out in. But the last thing they expected was to have their truck broken into and thousands of dollars worth of equipment stolen. What the thieves didn't take, they left strewn around a car park.
We thought that no one would ever take something from a rescue vehicle or any emergency vehicle for that matter. Somebody could have died because of this act of vandalism, I suppose.
The truck was parked in a floodlit, security patrolled area, but that didn't stop thieves picking its locks and helping themselves to ropes, tarpaulins, first aid gear and 2 expensive portable radio sets, the type volunteers rely on during hazardous rescue operations.
Without communications, an organisation such as us, who are on call 24 hours a day, are stumped without good communications.
It's the first time in the service's 20-year history that gear has been stolen. The organisation can't afford to insure its equipment and relies on community fundraising efforts to keep going. An appeal will be launched to help replace the radios.
It was a disappointing end to an outstanding season. The Falcons were beaten in both quarter-final matches in Adelaide, losing the series 2-1. But as they've done all season, the side showed great character, particularly in Game 2, when they recovered from a 27-point deficit to come within 3 points of the lead.
I told the players afterwards that we had a very good year. We're proud of them. The effort and the character of this basketball team was exceptional.
Coach Wiseman will be at the helm again next season, but like last year, he'll be looking for an import to partner Butch Hayes. The Falcons are resigned to losing Reggie Smith, with NBA and European clubs expressing interest in the power forward.
And we would love to have him, but the simple fact is we can't afford him. He's worth too much money in other markets.
The club hopes to talk to all players in the next 3 weeks, including the likes of Tony Jensen and Michael Johnson, with a view to next season.
Obviously, we're going to want a lot of the players back. We've got some good talent here, and I would say most of the players back. But we do have to look at ways to improve the team, and that means we have to put each position under scrutiny.
Spraying could soon become a thing of the past. Scientists have now genetically engineered a cotton that naturally kills its predators.
And so now any caterpillars that come along and eat the cotton plant are killed, and this will substantially reduce the amount of chemical pesticides which the Australian cotton industry pours onto their crop each year.
But the cotton industry will not be the only winner from the 10 years of research, with the technology to be adapted for other crops.
The technology for genetically engineering plants is now being adapted to all sorts of different crops, and pasture plants, and I think eventually all of these things will flow through to other crops.
The breakthrough was announced at Australasia's biggest science gathering, ANZUS, opened in Newcastle by Federal Science Minister Peter Cook. Former Newcastle University student Dr Bobby Vale was named as the Unsung Scientific Hero of the Year. The award recognises her contribution to science, which includes using her body as a live experiment as she battles a terminal brain tumour.
I've had the works of chemotherapy and looking at adapting mustard gas from World War I to the drug that was given to me that somehow has extended my life at least 6 months beyond what they thought was possible.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
For most people, visiting the local branch of the NRMA to inquire about roadmaps or insurance policies is a chore. But for some, it can be frustrating. 6 staff members at the Jesmond branch in Newcastle have spent the last 2 years learning sign language in a bid to make life easier for both consultants and customers who cannot hear.
Around about 2 years ago, some deaf people came into the NRMA and they needed some help with insurance, and I couldn't help them. And it was very frustrating for me not to be able to help them.
The staff are at different stages of signing after undergoing a 30-week training course in their own time. Sue Connors says the response from the deaf community has been overwhelming.
Lots of deaf people come in here now to see us, yes. I have made some really good deaf friends. Yeah, it's just good.
It's the only NRMA branch in the state that has not just 1 but 6 staff members trained to speak in sign language. It's hoped other branches will be inspired to do the same.
We would love to see the NRMA go all across New South Wales with this.
Amanda Bolger, NBN News.
A bad back or neck can be a painful and difficult problem to treat. For those whose work involves manual labour, it could mean the end of their working life. And while bad posture or injury was thought to be the main cause, new research has discovered 2 separate organisms that are commonly found with the complaint.
They are 2 members of the Staphylococcus family. They would be largely tended to be overlooked in normal laboratory procedures.
Up to 40% of people with back or neck problems have the organisms. Dr Neil McGregor has worked for 5 years with researchers from Newcastle and Sydney universities in making the discovery, which was outlined at the ANZUS conference in Newcastle today. And while it's created a stir in the scientific world, the researchers believe it is a breakthrough.
Well, we'd like to think so, yes.
75% of people will get back or neck problems in their life. 20% will have continual pain. With the latest discovery, it's hoped that scientists may at some stage be able to treat the organisms and possibly offer some relief for sufferers. Peter Ryan, NBN News. The awesome power of Mother Nature has made its mark at Stockton Beach. Thousands of tonnes of sand have been eaten away. Walkways have fallen into the surf.
It's been a devastating sort of couple of days here with the big swells we've had.
Up to 10 metres of beach has disappeared overnight. But while the storm swells continue to pound the coastline, locals here at Stockton are angry that Newcastle Council isn't doing enough to protect the beach.
Out of sight, out of mind. I mean, if it was Newcastle Beach, I think we'd have everybody and their dog over there doing something about it, like, you know.
Council workers have blocked off entrances to the beach. The 2 and 3 metre drops to the water considered a dangerous risk to sightseers. 2 months ago, a 9-year-old boy was trapped while playing under a bank that collapsed after being gouged away in the last storm. This afternoon, Newcastle Council confirmed a bulldozer will be brought in tomorrow to try and save what sand is left.
It's going to take some time to figure out the most cost-effective way of dealing with it, but we certainly will to rectify the dangerous aspects of it immediately.
Experts say the sand will come and go. 50 years ago, Stockton Beach was facing a similar threat. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
During the 3-day ANZUS conference, some ingenious inventions and ideas have been presented by some of Australia and New Zealand's brightest scientific minds. Social scientist George Chandler has come up with a novel way of making them a reality. He suggested a new TV program canvassing the ideas.
The program would show 5 inventions or innovations, and the viewers would be able to use the internet or to ring up and bet on the ones that they think would be winners.
George says an investment fund would collect each punter's wager of $25 and allocate it to the nominated scientific idea. In return,
you'd get the guaranteed right to buy shares in that development when it reached the manufacturing stage.
George Chandler says gambling on science instead of the races would give the average Aussie a chance to invest in new and possibly successful technology while keeping the profits in Australia. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The first emergency in last year's Epsom, Navy SEAL, ridden by Darren Beedman, came from nowhere to win the time-honoured mile at Randwick for Paul Perry. If you believe in omens, Beedman is again on a good chance as he's on another first emergency tomorrow in Chunganoff. But for an honest performer, the Lees trained Salivate must come into consideration after its second in the Cameron Handicap ahead of the much-fancied juggler from the all-conquering Waterhouse stable.
Well, he's going to get back a little bit, and with a capacity field, he's going to need a little bit of luck.
And if the sting's out of the ground at Randwick, another northerner in Tramway winner Rembetica is likely to firm in the Epsom market. Lees also has Irish Rort entered in Monday's Metropolitan, which includes a host of Waterhouse runners and Newcastle Cup winner Ceto Bridge. Meantime, 170 surfers are expected to take part in the Steel City's Malibu's longboard contest at Newcastle this weekend. $12,000 will be on offer across 7 divisions, with last year's winner Peter Sharp from the Central Coast again expected to be amongst the prize money.
It's a debate which has divided the oyster industry for more than a decade. Should the Pacific oyster be allowed to compete with the Sydney rock? At a heated meeting at Port Stephens today, farmers met with fishery experts on a proposal to bring Pacific oyster stock, or spat, in from Tasmania to boost the crop in Port Stephens.
These guys have spent a lot of time, a lot of money, and they've gone down the wrong track. They haven't backed the right horse.
Many Port Stephens producers are worried if spat is introduced from Tasmania, it could bring with it a disease threat, not just for the oyster industry but all marine life in the port. Powerful lobby group the New South Wales Farmers Association has moved into the fight, claiming if scientific tests prove the spat is safe, the move could be the region's saviour.
Well, we're now looking at an oyster industry in Port Stephens that is only worth about a quarter of what it was 10 to 15 years ago.
Fisheries investigations will continue, with the Minister, Bob Martin, expected to make a decision in the near future. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
After a year in the wilderness, the breakers are back. This time it appears to be with all the right ingredients, a positive administration, working within an expanding new national body and a coach dedicated to rebuilding the club.
Newcastle has been shafted in the past by the politics of soccer in this country. I think the people that are now in charge will not shaft this club. The people that did shaft them are gone.
Cosmina is determined to build his side around northern New South Wales youth, believing such talent could give the Breakers a title within 5 years. Such an attitude is reflected in the senior squad announced and paraded at today's launch. Leading the team will be David Lowe, who, despite some concerns about the lack of a trial game, believes the team will give a good account of itself in the season opener today week against UTS Olympic.
Hasn't been ideal. But come next Friday night, there's only 11 of them, 11 of us, and, we'll be giving it our all.
And they'll be doing it in this new strip modelled by Breakers scholarship holders Clayton Zane and Glenn Moore, while Ralph Mayer demonstrated the club's away uniform. Further good news for the club will follow shortly with the addition of a major sponsor.
And we are still negotiating, but as I said, they are very encouraging, and we hope to make an announcement within the next 10 days.
50 years on, history has finally recognised the role played by women like Jean Harley in helping to bring Australia through the war years. Local MP Peter Morris today presented Mrs Harley with the Civilian Service Medal, acknowledging her service in the Voluntary Aid Detachment, which carried out hospital and welfare work during the war. However overdue, the recognition has been a delight for Mrs Harley. The presentation was a family affair. Husband Alan also awarded a Wartime Appreciation Certificate for his Army service in New Guinea and the Pacific. The Australia Remembers certificates are becoming an increasingly sought-after memento for those who served at home and abroad, regarded by many as a valuable family keepsake to remind successive generations of the price of peace. A cup of coffee, a Kit Kat and a welcome break from the road. The Driver Reviver formula was developed at Singleton 10 years ago. The anniversary was celebrated in a presentation this afternoon. Retired policeman Rod Bates and the local Lions Club honoured for coming up with an answer to driver fatigue.
If we can keep people alert and ease that tiredness, then they drive safer. Simple.
From the start, it was clear to the volunteers running the rest stop that they were filling a need.
When you're here at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning and you see the state of some of the drivers that call in here, we're probably fortunate that we are here, or they're probably fortunate that we are here, because I doubt if they'd get to the other side of the bridge before they crashed.
After humble beginnings here in Singleton, Driver Reviver now boasts 90 rest stops in New South Wales, 200 across Australia. And none of them are idle, with 1.2 million motorists expected to take advantage of the service this year alone.
When you stop and think of how many accidents or road crashes that we've prevented, it makes you feel really good.
With increased support from road safety authorities, service clubs and the private sector, the Driver Reviver program continues to grow. It'll always measure its success, though, in the number of travellers safely reaching their destination.
The final day of the 72-hole tournament and a chance for all the young hopefuls to meet the man who's done so much for junior golf and is responsible for the event. Jack Newton was introduced to all players on the first before they set off for another challenging round. Curry's Andrew Wiper had best handled those conditions in previous days, and while he shot his worst round of the tournament today, a 76, he held off Western Australian Simon Lacey, who had a 77. 4 players were tied for third, including Tamworth's Ben Lockwood, who had a consistent 4 days, finishing with a 75. In the Open Girls, Queenslander Leah Hart had a tight struggle with Sydney's Nadina Taylor, who was 1 shot back after an impressive 81 today. For 16-year-old Wiper, who was young enough to defend his title next year, there was a simple explanation for his success.
Just started to hit the ball well, hit some greens, sink some putts.
It's the backdrop that has put Boolaroo on the map for all the wrong reasons. And it's not tourists who visit these suburban backyards shadowed by the Pasminco lead smelter. They're representatives of the Australian Medical Association, Greenpeace and the Australian Conservation Foundation.
I think Australia is looking down the barrel of an environmental disaster.
They say many health problems can be directly attributed to environmental factors, with Boolaroo cited as a prime example. It's claimed children are especially at risk, with the air they breathe, the soil they play in and the houses they live all contaminated with lead.
60% of children in this district in which we are now have blood lead levels that are above the acceptable level.
Well, obviously there's lead, but in addition to lead there's cadmium, zinc, arsenic, sulphur dioxide, sulphur trioxide, mercury.
It's part of a nationwide tour by this unlikely coalition of medical and conservation groups that aims to pressure governments into fixing the problems. Newcastle's BHP and Kooragang Island included on the health and green hit list. But with Boolaroo still to be given a clean bill of health, residents fear that the long wait is far from over.
I'd like to see the people that are living here given the opportunity to be relocated by the company. If the company's got over $40 million to spend on that expansion, they should move the people out.
Pasminco couldn't be reached for a comment. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Nick's joy giving Chris Munson and Warwick farm trainer John Schroed the biggest win of their careers. It returned $18 for the win, finishing ahead of the Gallant Dane win and Juggler. To the Spring Champion Stakes, and the Danehill colt Nothing Like a Dane finishes off the 2,000 metre journey in style. Ridden by Shane Dye, it started at 13-4 and gave the Kiwi Hoop and Gay Waterhouse the first of a major double as they went on to win the Craven Plate on Stony Bay. The final Group 1 event for the day was the Flight Stakes over 1,600 metres, with Pontel Lass brilliantly ridden to victory by Glenn Boss for Clary Connors.
Emergency services were alerted to the scene on Bridgeman Road just after 8. The vehicle carrying a load of hay had apparently veered across the road and slammed into a tree. The man's name has not been released. It's the first fatal crash of the October long weekend. By the same time last year, 9 people had died on the state's roads. Police are urging motorists to remain vigilant, particularly on their homeward bound journey.